Hi, I'm Scott. I work for Shutterfly. Steven mentioned I'm a software engineer over there. Shutterfly is a pretty big business in terms of revenue. We just broke the $1 billion mark. Most of that revenue, not all, but most of it comes from client applications that our customers use in order to create products. A lot of those are on the desktop. A lot of them, some of them are mobile clients, but today we're specifically talking about our desktop clients because that's really where most of our revenue comes from. And that's really what our team has focused on and been able to deliver continuously. Being able to do that obviously keeps your customers happy, right? Keeps the revenue flowing. It keeps the doors open and the lights on. But in order to really be able to keep people happy, right, you need to be able to address needs in real time. Let's get this thing working. So a while back, a few years back, sort of the dream that one of our VPs really like to promote. He's like, I want you guys to be able to come into work, have an idea, and have it on production by the end of the day, right? Be driving in, have this great idea, and be able to ship it, right? It's just the continuous delivery sort of model, and that's the idea. You want to be able to do it confidently, right? You want to be able to do it quick. You want to be able to do it with confidence. Quick is actually really easy, right? Fast is not a problem. We can get stuff onto prod really quick, right? It's just it might be garbage. Getting it there confidently ends up looking something a little bit maybe like this, right? I'm gonna do all of this nonsense, right? And ordering pizza is a legitimate step of that process because we're gonna get a whole bunch of people in a room so that we can have confidence around what we're shipping, right? And this is not fast, right? This is a very slow process. This is something that we're just gonna sit and we're gonna churn on, right? It's gonna take days, maybe weeks, to really have the confidence around it that we think that we need. How many times can you do this in a week, in a month, in a year? Right? For some places, this is a once a month deal, right? And you roll forward and this is what you ship. Right? The problem is that sometimes all that process gives you this illusion of confidence, but it's really not all that confident because everybody's sort of codependent, right? I'm the developer, I wrote this thing, but it's going into this big release and I don't really know the full scope of impact on the full release. And I bet QA will catch that. QA is counting on the developers to do their job and do things correctly. And they think they've tested everything. It kind of looks good, right? We've got some automation that says things are passing. Let's ship it to prod. And it hits prod and something happens because we missed a step, right? We didn't have full automation. So how do we get both? How do we get fast and how do we get confident? I really want to talk about our approach, right? It's one approach that we have found that works, right? This isn't the approach, but this is one approach that we have found works really well. It started a while back, really, as most good things are going to start. It started with our architecture. Shutterfly as a company has existed for over 15 years, and some of our code is over 15 years old. We have old code in prod, right? I made a change the other day. The time between change lists was 8.5 years. It was kind of ridiculous, right? So we have old code. So when I talk about architecture, my main point here is that I'm not talking about overhauling something. I'm not talking about needing to go in and say, oh, well, now I want to change how my client applications run. I have to overhaul the whole system, right? Really what we're talking about primarily is decoupling. And when I say decoupling, I don't mean that you have to have something that's totally standalone. I'm not talking about detaching, right? I'm not talking about total overhaul, but I'm talking about taking your piece within your system and being able to decouple it, right? Usually, most of the time, unless you're working on some greenfield project, most of the time you're going to be working within the constraints, with pre-existing constraints, pre-existing architectural constraints, right? You can't just go in and obliterate the whole thing and say, we're going to do this the right way, right? You have to work within some constraints that are less than ideal. And so you need to be able to go into a system like that and say, okay, we're going to take this piece here, and today we're talking about client applications specifically. We're going to take this piece right here and decouple it from the rest of this system so that we can release it continuously. These principles also apply to new projects as well, right? You want new things to be decoupled. Decoupling is obviously a general principle that we try to follow, but I want to talk a little bit here about how we did this, the past that we're sort of coming from, where we got to today, and some of our learnings. Historically, Shutterfly has had very tightly coupled JSP files for its front end, right? Whatever your server framework is, for us, right, we're using Spring, and we've got this Java front end, and we've got these JSP files, where our clients are delivered in JSP files that are very tightly coupled to the server, right? Server frameworks enable a lot of great things, but you can end up with these things that are so intertangled that really nice client-server separation that we have on paper, right? Client here, server here, communication back and forth, right? It really just gets munged together. And you end up with lots of problems from tight coupling. Part of it, one of those is that often what you have is service functionality that's really embedded into your JSP or whatever it is that your framework enables, right? You have something that really should be a client-service sort of relationship, right? Where your client maybe makes a request here, gets some data. Well, now you've got that baked into your page because your framework kind of lets you do that. And that, again, that client-server separation becomes very hard to piece apart. We ended up with a lot of session abuse, right? We would have a lot of session data that gets baked into that client application that we start relying on, right? And now you have megs and megs of session data per user that now you have a scaling problem, right? You start having this session affinity problem where now this client not only is super reliant on session data, but it's reliant on this specific server in this pool, right? So now we're really tightly coupled, not just to our server, but to a specific physical server. Right? So we have these tightly coupled components. And that was kind of the system that evolved over 15 years that we ended up needing to piece away from. So we did that by moving our client applications, and we've started doing this gradually, but we have our client applications hosted in a static single-page app. It's an index file, right? It's a single HTML file. That's how we deliver our client app. It's one page, right? It's not a JSP. Doesn't mean you couldn't use a JSP, but I'll talk about in a sec. You just want to make sure you don't abuse that. We identified different services that we basically had baked in to some of these client applications, and we started extracting those out. We've got a service over here that we need, right? We've got a service over here that we need to stand up. And so you start piecing those out. And there's a lot of talk about microservices here, even today at this conference. We really started leveraging static assets for delivering our applications. Our app is, several of our apps now, they're delivered entirely as static assets, right? It's static files, and we serve them up through a CDN, right? So not only have we decoupled from our server framework by deploying a single index file, right? We've decoupled from the server almost completely by pulling our application as static assets from a CDN, right? It just so happens that CDN maps back to our application server, right, where all of this stuff lives anyway, right? But really, we're very decoupled, and so we've pulled this. We're just pulling static assets out of a CDN. That could be from anywhere, right? That's how we architected our application. So our app actually still lives and sits on an application server that has all of this overhead and baggage of 15 years, right? It still lives on that server, but it's generally decoupled from that server because we're not hooked into the framework, and we're able to sort of deliver it in isolation. So key learning, right? Leverage your server framework for very slow-moving changes. You're trying to deliver quickly, frequently. You don't want to be leaning on that server framework for these things. not application state, right? We try to avoid server session data as much as possible. And especially when we're talking about front-end apps, and if a lot of you are like front-end wizards, we can go the route of taking functionality and baking it into the front end and having these really rich front ends where now we've taken the problem of having services that are embedded into our service framework and really taking them and baking them into our front end. So now we have a client application that's really capable, but as soon as it has some piece of functionality that we need elsewhere, well, how do we got to tease it out of our client app now. So being able to balance functionality between client and microservices is a very important part of how we sort of restructured things. I want to talk about the mechanics. So that's the architecture. That's sort of our structure of things. And actually, let me, just so you have some context here, I'm going to pull up our client application. This is our PhotoBooks application. And this is what I'll be coding against and deploying today. But this is our front-end app. It allows users to come in here and add photos, create a photo book, right? They can do a lot of pretty cool things. It's a fairly full-featured app. And this is what we deliver, and this is what I'll be showing you today in terms of what we actually code against and what we ship. So the mechanics, right? We want to figure out how do we get from an individual developer machine, how do we ship that out to prod? What's the process look like? I'll walk you through it here today. So the change I'm going to make that you will see, this is our application. We have our preview and order buttons up here in the right. I want to add a save button up there. Okay, so that's going to be our demo today. I'm going to add a save button up there that's going to allow people to click save and do what you would expect it to do. It just so happens that I've already done the coding for this, and it's very exciting. If I can get it over here on this screen. Come on. Terminal doesn't want to join me. Okay. All right. So, can everybody see this? There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm here in. We're using Git. I'm here in my repository. I'm on our develop branch. Develop is our name for master. So this is our master branch. I'm going to create a new branch, and I'm going to call it save button, right? I happen to have my changes already made. So what I've done here, I'm adding a little snippet of HTML, right? This is going to add a save button to the template for this page, right? Nothing big, nothing all that fancy. But we're going to go ahead and I would normally build this here locally and show it. For the sake of time, we're going to sort of skip through that. But let's go ahead and add this. I'm going to add a save button. All right. Oh, I misspelled the branch name. All right, so we're going to push. Yeah, I'm going to call it save button J. for some reason. Okay, so I'm pushing my change. My change has been pushed. We're going to go ahead now and we're going to go to GitHub, which is where we have this hosted at the moment. Okay, I have just none of this is magic. Creating a pull request here. Say add in that save button. Create the pull request, and I'm going to assign it to Joe here.
Hello.
Joe Rosick I work with. He's going to go ahead and review this for me, right, and approve it. So what happened there when I went ahead and pushed that commit to Git? We have a little bit of Jenkins magic that goes on, right? And I'll show you sort of the overview of what happens here. So I commit to version control, right? We have a few things that go on, and we're using Jenkins as our build server. You might be using Travis, whatever you're using, right? We have a poller job that's going to sit and watch our repo, right? And it's going to look for changes. It's just going to poll every 5 minutes. If something's changed, it's going to start my next job, which is what we're going to call our builder, right? This build job does all of your, whatever your build is. We're using Grunt. Maybe you're using Maven or Gradle or Gulp or whatever the new hotness is. You're going to run your build, but we're doing a few things in addition to just running that build. We have a custom UUID that we generate for every build, right? So we have this unique ID, and you'll see that UID gets used as it's part of the URL segment that we deploy to. So when we ship our application, we're actually going to push it into a folder that has that UUID on it. All the static assets are going to get exploded into there. We're going to run our grunt build, right? And then we're going to package up and deploy an artifact from that build. Let's go back over here to Jenkins. Let's see if it's doing its thing. We should have a Galleon build running here. Okay, so here's a build that's pending. This is my save button J build, and it's pending on our build machine. We're going to go ahead and push this to the front of the queue. Sorry, folks. We're going to kill that one. We're going to kill that one. All right. Our build machine is offline. Classic. So, Joe, can you take a look at that?
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. So, what's going on in the background? We'll hopefully show you here in just a second. So we've got a job that's polling, and then we've got a job that runs a build. It's going to package up all of those assets into a single artifact, right? We package up. It's a fairly small artifact actually. Every one of our builds an artifact that's about 1.5 megs. We ship that into a repository. For us, we're using Artifactory. Maybe you're using npm, whatever it is, right? But we're shipping out a single static artifact. Are we back? Is it running? Okay. Once that artifact has been deployed, we're going to kick off a separate job. We're going to call that our deployer job, right? And really all that job is responsible for is taking the artifact that we just created and shipped, and it's going to dump that onto every environment that we care about, right? For us, that means we're going to run it in our dev environment. We have a test environment that we call beta. We have a staging environment, and we're going to dump it in prod as well. So every commit. Remember, this is just a branch that we've built here, but we've pushed that out there. It gets built and it gets dumped into all of our environments, right? So that gets deployed out there, and that lives on every environment under that unique ID that we have, right? That UUID that we've generated. And I'll show you those URLs here in a sec. Once we do that, we run another job. It's our smoke test. We run that against our test environment. We do that to make sure that everything's sane, that this build looks okay. Normally, we won't merge any of our changes back into our master branch until after those smoke tests have run and everybody's given the thumbs up on the code review or on the pull request. But we let those smoke tests run. Those sort of give us a certain amount of sanity, and then we bring that in to our master build, our develop build, as we call it. All right, let's see if we're actually here. We running? Okay. So this is my build. I want to show you a few things here in the console output. Console output's always very exciting, I realize. Zoom in here. So you'll notice we've kicked off this job and we've generated this UUID. Okay. Nothing exciting or different about that. That's just your standard UUID implementation. But you'll notice you may access the application in the following environments. So what we take our artifact that we generate out of this build, and we're going to drop it into all of our environments under this directory, right? So if you go /pb, for us that's photo books, /builds, and then this UUID is where we dump all of those static assets. Remember we talked about how heavily we leverage static assets. Our index file on that also reads all of the scripts and everything that it needs from this same directory, right? So every time we compile up our scripts, our JavaScript and everything, we dump it into this same place. All the scripts are read from this same place, right? So we never have scripts from one build that are colliding with scripts from another build. They're all packaged and shipped and contained together. Our tests run. So we'll run a bunch of stuff here. We've got a unit test suite that runs, and once everything is finished, we're going to uglify our code. In the meantime, Joe has approved my pull request. So you'll notice this is telling me that my checks haven't completed yet. I'm still waiting for my smoke test to complete before my GitHub pull request will tell me that I'm okay to merge. But waiting on this guy. So you'll notice it's packaged up our application into a single TGZ file that we've got ready to go, and now it's running our deploy. So it's going to take it's taking that single artifact and it's going to ship it out to our artifact repository, and then it's going to kick off another job. Okay, we have more interesting stuff here. These are our actual deployer build invocations. So these are kicking off builds for each of our environments to tell it, hey, take that artifact that we just made, put it in beta, put it in stage, put it in prod, explode it, get it ready to go. Once all of that happens, we can actually go ahead and access this in all of our environments. It's 12:55. Our beta environment's going to restart in 5 minutes, so maybe we'll catch it before we actually go out. Okay, so here's our beta environment. There's the save button. I'm glad you trusted me that it would have worked locally. But this is on our test environment. Notice again, you've got the unique UID hash there in the URL, right? This is really key when we get to the production deployment, which I'll talk about in just a second. But I've got my save button. Everybody's happy. You'll also notice that we ship that to our prod site. I don't know if everybody can see, but I just lost it there. But we actually ship to production. So here's stage, and here is production. Let's go prod. So this is on shutterfly.com/build/blah, blah, blah. It's unavailable at the moment because our production replication takes about 10 minutes because we've got a few hundred servers in the pool. So it takes a while for it to replicate this artifact against all of the servers in the pool. We'll come back to it. Probably before the end of this demo, it will be up and ready to go. But that's sort of the next to last step. Again, this was for a branch build. So then once I'm actually ready with that branch build, I can merge it in, and it's gonna ship to. Sorry, this whole process is going to repeat, right? Once I've taken that and merged that into our main build, we've set these up. We've set up our builds so that every build of our master branch is automatically updated as the main build in all of our test environments, right? So you don't actually have to know that build ID in anything but prod, right? Once you've taken and merged your changes into any of the test into the main develop branch, right? All of our test environments, they're immediately updated. So that means QA, product managers, everybody that cares about, they're looking at the latest, absolute latest build. When we're actually ready to say, okay, this thing is good to go in prod, right? There's actually no deployment because it's already in prod. It's already been pushed. The only thing that has to change is we have a symlink that points to a unique build, right? We have a manual intervention step at that point where a product manager or a release manager, whoever needs to step in and say, yes, we're ready to change to this build, right? We can't, in our situation, we don't continuously deliver in the classic sense because we actually have other stakeholders involved that need to be able to say, no, we can't put that out there yet. We've got marketing people who need to make sure that they're not shipping a certain feature or promotion until a certain date. Right? So we have this manual intervention step where a product manager actually says, yeah, ship it. Right? But as soon as they say ship it, there's a very small release job that's run that says, hey, change the symlink to point from this build to this build. Right? And it's already done. You can see how rollback is also fairly simple. Right? Because all we're doing if we say, hey, whoa, that was premature, or it turns out there's a bug over here. Right? If we need to roll back, it's really as simple as change it back to this build. More often we roll forward. We patch something real fast, ship it out there, and point to another build. But the actual production release is very simple because there's nothing to release. It's already released. And as soon as they flip that switch, our customers are hitting production and they're seeing the latest that we wanted them to see.
How many versions do you keep in production?
We've been told by our release engineering team to not worry about it. Because those artifacts that we ship exploded. They're about 3-4 megs, including all the asset files, images, and everything. And so they just don't even care. It's such a small footprint in terms of overall storage costs on the server that they won't care probably for a few more years. So those things help us go fast. But really, there's confidence built into some of the mechanics because of the discipline, right? There are elements of discipline that are baked into the mechanics that I just showed you. We're building for change. That's the main thing. I mean, that's the real reason for the discipline. We want to be able to change fast, right? And in order to be able to change fast, you have to be disciplined about how you come at things. The single most important number to me in that whole build process is the number of unit tests. Last I checked, we had about 4,500 unit tests for a client application, which I think we should have a few more. But it's clearly you've got to have tests. You won't have confidence without tests, right? If they're, yes?
Is the unit testing automated?
Yeah, so the unit testing happens every build. So it's all baked into that build process there. I could show you a bunch of dots in the log output where we have unit tests running, right? That's a part of every single build, and if the unit tests don't pass, then obviously the build doesn't pass. Code reviews. So what I did here with Joe, where we walked through that process. Very seldomly do we ever have a pre-commit review. We avoid that, right? Reviews are a big part of what we do, and to me, a very essential part of the discipline. If you don't have code reviews, then really you don't have all the visibility and the communication that we've talked about today. You don't have that. Code review is a really critical part of that stuff. It also helps you. Those code reviews help you foster conventions within your team, right? You see somebody else's code, you pick up on how they're doing this or doing that, right? Those things are really important, and it helps you learn. You learn personally when you're looking at somebody else writing some bit of code, or when somebody else gives you some sort of scathing code review, right? I've sent some of those to you all, and I've learned a lot that way. So code reviews are critical. Feature validation. You get on, you verify your feature, right? Hopefully that's a basic practice, but if we're not doing that, it can cause us a lot of personal embarrassment. Monitoring, right? It's really not DevOps if you're not watching what's going on. We've got a Sumo Logic dashboard to help us. This is just sort of our high-level overview, but this gives us some of our high-level stats that we care about, right? How many startups do we have today? How many of those were errors, right? How many distinct users do we have? Looks like yesterday in the last half we had about 30,000 starts on our app. Dare I look at the numbers? Yeah, we had about 91 of those 30,000 starts were errors, right? So we're happy with that. That's all right. But you've got to be doing the monitoring, right? And if you're not, that's a really crucial part of the engineering discipline that you're missing out on. All of this, really, what we're trying to get at is happiness. Part of Shutterfly's mission is sharing life's joy, right? But ideally, that's not just with our customers. Ideally, that's sort of how we operate internally as well, being able to do things in a way that really is bringing a lot of joy both to our peers, to our managers, right, and ultimately to the customers, because we care about the customers. We have this whole approach. Let's see if it's on prod. We should be there now. There we are. Come on. Anyway, while we wait for this to come up, if it comes up, this whole release cycle, right? This whole releasability, it's really nice, it's really shiny, it's really cool, but it's enabled us to do some really great things, right? When you talk about joy, we were able, when we first started to roll out this idea, our product managers were like, hey, whoa. Do we really want to launch? Why do I want to ship that often? That feels a little bit fast. Are you sure? So we said, yeah, trust us. This will be a really good thing. Just trust us. The first week that we shipped this application, we launched an A/B test, right? Our new app versus our old app, and our product managers are sitting there looking at customer feedback in real time, and we're able to turn this around and release day after day after day after day, responding to user feedback almost in real time. And they're watching the impact on A/B tests, right, as we're able to ship this. Right, so this was something that our product managers just thought, oh, wow, we can respond in a way that they haven't been able to ever before. In the past, it was maybe twice a month you'd be able to address user feedback. And here we were daily on an A/B test able to respond. We've had all the way up at the VP level, right? We've had one of our VPs was telling me about a discussion that he had where he was talking with one of the general managers of the business and saying, what do we want to tackle next? And they started talking about that. And he paused the conversation. He said, I just want to point out here, we're not talking about, how are we going to put out this fire, or what features do we need to cut, or how are we going to trim back? He's able to say, we're sitting here and we've released continuously, right? And been able to, throughout the whole development process, been able to release this way. And now we're talking about, hey, we're sitting here comfortably. What do we want to do? Right? So this has been something that really has enabled us to share a lot of joy, even internally, with the people that we work with. So again, architecture is foundational. You've got to have that. The mechanics help us drive the speed. The discipline is really what gives us the confidence. And that's how we're able to do this sort of continuous delivery, at least for some of our apps at Shutterfly. Any questions?
How do you coordinate with your APIs on the server side?
Some of the like the microservice dependencies and whatnot?
Right, if you're making a change to your API in order to support it in the future.
So a lot of that we try to enable it to be backwards compatible. Some of our APIs we have written in such a way that we have versioned APIs. So we can roll out multiple versions and push a new version of some feature, change some feature, right, in a subsequent version of that API, have both of them running in prod at real time, and then have our clients call back to peg themselves to a specific version of that API, right? And then when they're ready, roll forward, or have specific builds that roll forward and are working against those versioned APIs. Again, I realize not all services work that way. Not everybody versions their APIs in that way, and so we have other services that aren't versioned. For those, we have integration tests where we validate and we make sure that those services are working the way that we expect them to work. And when they don't, right, then flags go off and we reach out and really we connect with those teams, work together to make sure that we're going to be on the same page here before we ship this thing out the door. But between versioned APIs and our integration tests with those services, we've been able to mitigate some of those versioning problems. Other questions? Yeah.
Could you talk about your database schema migration?
In what context?
So, do you guys use any relational databases?
Yes.
So, if some code you're releasing depends on some sort of schema change to your database, so how do you coordinate that?
Yeah, that bit is. Let's say that part of things has not caught up to where we are with our clients. So our clients we've been able to move this part of things forward. There with our databases, we have basically tracked SQL queries that have to be run as part of a release, right? In order to move data, alter tables, change things, right? Those scripts still run as part of a longer running release that has carried over from sort of the 15 years of Shutterfly history. So yeah, hopefully we can come back next year and talk about continuous delivery of massive server migration projects, but we'll see. Any other questions?
You didn't talk at all about the CDN part of that. Does the deployment of the CDN happen automatically, or how does that happen?
Yeah, so because we're shipping to, we're unpacking things in those UUID wrapped sort of bundles. We're able to serve up all of our scripts through CDN. Our index file, we have a no cache header on. So that index HTML file, there's no caching of that file specifically, right? So you're guaranteed to take a 4K hit when you hit our landing page, right? You're definitely going to have 4K that's not coming out of cache. But every one of the assets on that page is coming out of a folder that's tied to that UUID. So all of those scripts, they're propagated to the CDN once, and then always pulled from that CDN, right?
So even with the symlink, if you hit that, like the actual production version of the app, your develop branch, that's pulling from the builds folder?
It's got
Yeah.
the source index and stuff.
Yeah. So come on in. Sorry, we're in Q&A. But if you tell me to stop, I can stop.
Yeah, now's a good time.
Yeah. Okay. To your question, right? We package all of our third-party scripts here, and these are all of our proprietary scripts, right? So it's in that builds folder, right? And we pull all of that hits the CDN, propagates the CDN, and from then on, it always hits the CDN. So, yeah, that's where the static files come in.
And if you're not in the builds folder, you still have the hash after the scripts tag. After the scripts folder, right, 4 modules.
Yeah. There's a unique hash that we have prepend to the file names for those scripts to make sure that those are unique as well. Yeah. Okay, cool. If you got any other questions, feel free to hit me up. Thanks.